Welcome to Electric Aviation, the next chapter in freedom. Why do we say the next chapter in freedom? Well, because freedom or mobility is not really mobility unless there's freedom of mobility. And when governments and governmental institutions try to control populations, the first thing they do is they take away freedom of speech and freedom of movement. And this is the next chapter in aviation, which is electric aviation. It's a fascinating, transformative industry that is rapidly developing. And today our panelists come from various segments of the electric aviation industry. In this webinar, you can expect to see an overview of the advanced air mobility industry today, the landscape, the key players, emerging technologies. You're going to hear about how transformative this industry is. It's not just something extra. It's not just a hobby, expensive hobby for people. There really is a transformative element to it. It's a key technology that allows freedom of mobility and exponential wealth creation, which is the mission of the Financial Policy Council. You're also going to see a 3 to 5 year outlook on electric aviation and what to expect, as well as investment opportunities for those who are wanting to invest in this segment. Our distinguished panelists come from companies that you may not be aware of, but I can guarantee you that they are at the leading edge of this industry. And the first is Luciano Froze. He's the Chief Marketing Officer of Up Partners. Up Partners works to advance the firm's mission of transforming the moving world and helping connect entrepreneurs, investors, corporations, and professionals who are also committed to reshaping the future of mobility. Luciano has a background with Embraer Corporation, the aircraft manufacturer. Clem Newton-Brown is logging on from Australia, so it's still early in the morning. He's CEO of a company called Skyports. Skyports is developing a network of landing sites for the future air taxi network, similar to helipads, but with its own twist. The next panelist that we have is Freshta Farzam. Freshta founded Light Aviation. Light Aviation is a game-changing hybrid hydrogen 40-seater eVTOL, which is an electric vertical takeoff and landing with tandem tilt wings. And she comes from a background in hydrogen technology and green aviation industries. And our final panelist is Matthew Parr with Rolls-Royce Electrical. He's the customer director at the newly formed Rolls-Royce Electrical Group, and is going to talk to us a little bit about the power systems that power these electric aircraft and make them go. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Ziad Abdelnour. Ziad is the chairman and CEO of Blackhawk Partners. He's also the founder of the Financial Policy Council, which is a group committed to wealth creation and educating people on sound public policy. And part of that Financial Policy Council is the Project Liberty Group, of which I and many others on this call are a part of. So we're going to have a great interactive session here. At the end, like Hiba said, please post your comments in the chat. We'll try to get to those at the end. And we really hope this is a learning experience for all. Ziad, over to you.
Thank you, David. Welcome to all of you. I'm glad to see a lot of new faces here, which is good, which means that we're growing. And the interest in what we do is expanding. Let me tell you a bit about the Financial Policy Council, why we do what we do, and what we're here for. The Financial Policy Council is a 501c3 organization under the IRS tax code. We've been in business since 2010, so we're going in our 13th year. We are growing by leaps and bounds. We have 72 corporate sponsors. We have 300,000 followers on social media. We have the Project Liberty team, which is expanding very aggressively. Today, 33 members on the team. We have a board of directors of 12 people, and we're here to educate, empower, inspire people. We're not a political organization. Maybe eventually we will form a 501c4, a PAC, but we're not yet there. So it's all about wealth creation and real education. Once you are educated properly, you can create real wealth. And when I talk about education, this is not an academic organization. We're not talking here about trends and what's happening out there, because you can see that you can read this in the Wall Street Journal. Nothing new and unusual. But what we like to do is bring in experts in every asset class. Today, we're going to talk about private aviation. If you check our videos, our clips, our shorts, our podcasts, our interviews in the past on YouTube, we have our own channel, you will see that we talk about every single asset class out there. Private equity, real estate, renewable energy, cannabis, you name it, every single topic. And the format we use, we bring in experts in every asset. We bring in experts in every asset class to share their views, their experience with the audience. It's very interactive, unlike other organizations where you have one guy, one speaker who pontificates about this and that. This is exactly the reverse. We democratize the discussion. We like to hear from the audience, their questions, and we like to share with the experts their points of view. But remember, this is not an academic organization. We're here for one thing only: freedom, patriotism, capitalism, and wealth creation. We're not gonna apologize for this. We are radical capitalists. That's the name of the game, because this is what matters, because this is what provides you with freedom. And freedom is everything. Without that, this is why we're all in the United States, and this is why we're all trying to do what we do. So anyway, so what I'm gonna do, the format we use for the newcomers, I'm gonna ask specific questions to the panelists to set the tone, and then I'm gonna leave it up to you to ask the questions you want. You can write your questions in the chat box, and Hiba will read the questions and address them to the panelists. Please stick to questions. We don't need any comments because we want to have enough time for everyone to ask his questions or her questions. And there is no stupid questions. We're here to learn. We want you to learn, to be very educated about the field, and to share your experience, because I see we have some experts in aviation also as part of the audience who've been at aviation for a number of years, 2-3 decades. So panelists expect to be grilled. So that's where we stand. So I'd like to start with fresh talk. Question.
I think Ziad,
and when do you think this will be a realistic option?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you were frozen. Hi. Hi, everyone. You were frozen. Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yes, of course. You know, this sometimes the transmission is not that great. The question is, do you think we can fully electrify a mass transit 40-seater eVTOL today? And when do you think this will be a realistic option?
Very good question. Thank you, Ziad. Well, thanks for this opportunity. I think fully electrifying a 40-seater eVTOL today with today's technology is impossible. That's why we came now with the hybrid solution. But definitely, I think within a near future, like within maybe 5 years, 7 years, Yes, because there is a lot of solutions under development regarding electric engines and larger sizes, or even fuel cells, hydrogen tanks, batteries. So yes, I think fully electrifying a 40-seater eVTOL with the weight of 17 tons that we have currently, today, no, it's not possible, but in the near future, yes.
All right, fair enough. I'd like to move to Matthew. Matthew, what is the role of traditional aerospace OEMs in advanced air mobility, and why will you be successful versus more agile startups?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I think in comparison to, say, sort of the late 2010s, we're really seeing the aerospace industry start to lean in to this new market in advanced air mobility. So this year, I think you're seeing not just propulsion companies, but also airframers starting to invest, because we see value in the market that is being created. We believe in the capability that the aircraft are going to offer. So you have Rolls-Royce, Safran, and Honeywell all investing now in electric propulsion systems, hybrid electric propulsion systems. You have Bell, you have Airbus, and you have Boeing all investing into these platforms as well. And it's because when we look at the aircraft, we believe that the differentiation in terms of safety, noise, and operating cost can be realized. And I think the relationship with the sort of the startups that have created this space, that have trailblazed, that have demonstrated that value proposition is not going to be one of winning versus losing. It's going to be one of partnership. Our focus at Rolls-Royce in particular is how do we partner increasingly into this organization to bring what we have in terms of capability and aerospace heritage and quality systems and safety systems, as well as differentiating technology, but then match that with the startups that are demonstrating such pace and really start to go and enable the market.
Very insightful. I'd like to move to Clem. Clem, there are a lot of vertiport companies springing up now. We see them all over the place. What makes Skyports different?
Thanks, Ed, and good morning, everybody from Australia. Perhaps just to backtrack a little bit, in terms of these aircraft, there'll be some people who aren't aware of what we're talking about. Fresh's aircraft is a very large one, but it goes right down to 2-seater aircraft, and probably most of the eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff landing aircraft, are in that sort of 2 to 6 passenger range, and most of them are planning on being battery operated. And as Freshta pointed out, there is limitations with batteries, but with these smaller aircraft, the OEMs believe that they can be useful even if they're doing shorter flights. So we're anticipating that the front runners, and there's probably 400 in development, and there's probably a dozen that you consider to be front runners. And the Volocopter, for example, I've just seen in Paris flying. That's going to be flying passengers at the Paris Olympics next year. In your part of the world, Joby is probably the front runner in the larger aircraft. So that's I think it's a 4 to 6 seater. And so these aircraft are definitely coming. So don't make the mistake of thinking this is all a fantasy. But go onto YouTube, Google it, and you'll find that the aircraft are out there. They've been flying for a long time, and to get to the point of being commercial is a big step. And the front runners are moving to that stage now. So I would expect in the next year or two we'll see the aircraft flying commercially. So what we need then is vertiports. So if all we've done is create a cleaner, quieter helicopter that flies as helicopters fly today from helipads and airports, then we haven't really created a revolution. This is it's a good progression in aviation, but to be a revolution, we need to actually break that nexus between aviation and airports and enable any property owner with an appropriate property to become a vertiport. And this is where we create the revolution, where we have aviation on demand, going to places where you want to go. And look, I don't think it's the vertiports are going to be in the everybody landing everyone's back garden. I think they're more likely to be dotted through communities, mainly in commercial and industrial areas initially. But as the community accepts them, then we'll see it'll be easier and easier to get vertiports. So with that introduction, vertiports, I think, are the missing piece of the puzzle in this whole industry, and have been neglected. There's huge opportunities here for investors and speculators who want to participate in the land grab that will be the vertiport industry. At the moment, there is nowhere in the world where a jurisdiction has set out exactly what a vertiport consists of, and that's what we're waiting on. There's guidelines that have been released, but it's a land use planning issue, which we need the vertiports to be seen as different to helipads, easier to get permits for than helipads, and then when that happens, this industry can really take off. So in terms of vertiports and your question, yeah, look, when I started this sort of 4 or 5 years ago, there was probably only a handful of us doing this. Now it seems that there's a vertiport company springing up every other week. Where we're different is that we're focused on a few different things which we think is useful. And the first of those is collecting together a stable of sites, partnerships with property owners who want to participate in this. And we've got many hundreds of sites, primarily in Australia, but we're opening that to the rest of the world as well. So we're in a position where we've got the property sites when the regulations allow us to activate them. And that's our primary difference. And I suppose the other things we're focusing on is the political and community and bureaucratic lobbying required developing vertiports which are affordable and can be placed on property sites by private owners. And the one behind me is a fairly large vertiport. That's more like a mini airport, but we do have other designs which are smaller and more suitable for private ownership.
Great. Thanks for your outlook, Glenn. Luciano, how are you doing? Glad to be here. You're here. Luciano, can you please provide some perspective in terms of how UP Partners is involved in the urban air mobility space, and highlight around your views and investment strategy as an investor, as a private equity investor?
Thank you, Ziad. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody, and great to connect. Perhaps taking a step back just to introduce everybody to UP Partners. So we are a mobility-focused investment firm with multiple strategies in terms of executing on our mission. Our mission is to transform the moving world, and we do that by building and investing in companies that help move people and goods cleaner, faster, safer, and at lower cost, and be that in the air, ground, sea, or space. So everything that's mobility related that feeds that mission is where we focus. We have a portfolio of about 22 companies that we're investors in, many of which, of course, are directly involved in the electric aviation, such as Beta Technologies, which of course many of you may know. But to echo what the group has already said, I mean, we're very much firm believers in this space. If we take a long-term view, thinking about the evolution of humanity, if we just take a statistics that really 1 in only 5 people have gone up and experienced flight, that is a pretty low number, we like to think, and we think there's a lot of opportunity as we bring the cost of transportation down. And as we increase mobility, we increase quality of life for those that have access, right, to that space. So electrification and electric aviation will play a very important role in enabling this accessibility and this mobility for various markets. We certainly see this space as evolving, and starting with other, let's say, initial lead indicators like drone deliveries, for example, that have continued to take place and double year over year over the last several years, with the likes of Walmart and other companies using drone technology. You have a series of OEMs that are now taking orders from not only airlines, but governments and other types of applications that will support the order book of over a dozen different eVTOL OEMs that are out there, right? But it's very much the view that we take is that this is a holistic ecosystem that needs a lot of moving parts, right? You need the product, the aircraft itself, but also those are very much under certification process, right? And it'll be interesting to watch over the next several years how that evolves in terms of who are the stay keepers, so to speak, right? Especially in these current capital markets, but also the ecosystem of the Vertiports, the support and services network for all of these new craft to fly around the world, and so there's a lot that needs to happen still, but emphasizing that we're very encouraged by this space, right? We see a lot of opportunity. You look at high density markets, like New York, like Sao Paulo, Dubai, Singapore. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for urban air mobility and electric aviation, and you have major movement in the space. And so as investors, we're thoughtful of, what are the enabling technologies, who are the winners here, that ultimately will deliver on this mission of increasing accessibility to people, helping move people and goods, right? So it's not just necessarily about people the way we view it, and ultimately, again, benefiting all of society with more efficient mobilities at lower cost.
That's great. I very much share your views, Luciano. Thank you. Going back to Freshta again, talking about electrification. Freshta, where do you see the challenges and opportunities in electrification, especially in the newly expanded ecosystem that your Skybus, Skytruck will offer and require?
Thanks, Jed. Well, I see that the challenges I see in the charging infrastructure, that's still the solutions still need to be worked on, even though there has been a lot of work so far the last 4 or 5 years, actively and very aggressively. But now the topics of hydrogen, we have a lot of hybrid hydrogen aircraft as well now in the market. So I think those the recharging and refueling solutions, that will be definitely a challenge. And for our Skybus, I think it's the opportunity now, or the Skybus or the cargo variant, the Skytruck, delivering. So that's actually creating the opportunities of expanding existing vertiport designs even. So even the entire ecosystem is just gonna inevitably expand with it, because yes, it is a the first time we announced it was in a helicopter investor event. Yes, it is somehow an alternative to a helicopter, but electric version, and it is very interestingly a very groundbreaking game changer, because it is not just replacing maybe as an alternative the helicopters, but we're talking about ferries, the waterways, which means inevitably actually offering transportation solutions for islands. So it's creating new routes and new opportunities. And that will be actually an opportunity to even think about refueling stations on small islands, to actually maybe look how we can push an entire economy of a country by inhibiting even islands. So it's like a beautiful expansion of entire areas in industry. So it's also because we have a range of up to 1,000 kilometers, even the routes of for regional aviation, for example, this is what we are seeing, that this is an opportunity because yes, we can even use the existing infrastructure with our Skybus in regional airports, but we can also use our own expanded vertiports for our and create new routes. Right now, we're looking at different routes in Europe and also in developing countries. So that's basically the opportunity for a lot of people that we're now in talks with, different governments as well, that actually, instead of investing in capital intensive infrastructure, comparing it with our Skybus and offering that kind of new infrastructure in the air, looking at the operating costs, it's very, very attractive. So that's opportunities.
That's definitely a game changer, and we like game-changing technologies because that's the optimal path to wealth creation. Love it. Thank you, Freshta. Going back to Matthew. Matthew, what's expected to pace the development of advanced air mobility market? Technology, infrastructure, regulation? What's your view on that?
It's a brilliant question. I think it's worthwhile that I quickly explain my risk appetite as I start to answer that question, so you have an idea of where I'm coming from. We started the Rolls-Royce electrical business in about 2018 with about 100 engineers focused on advanced air mobility. In 2019, we bought the Siemens aircraft business, which was about 200 electrical engineers. And then since 2019 to today, we've grown the business to about 550 electrical engineers. So go on, you can do the maths. We're probably investing 65 to 70 million last year into electrical technology. And we see we're going to need to spend about another 500 million market in terms of a portfolio of electrical motors, power electronics, and as exactly as especially we're talking about hybrid electric technology, so a turbo generator as well. And I think when we on those three areas, so we reflect on the difference between technology and industrialized product. It is relatively easy to build an MVP style, a mid style aircraft and take that operating. It is a completely different challenge to think about the industrialization of that to the right safety levels and then bring that through to the market. It is a very different stage to have certification standards, certification means of compliance, and actually certify an aircraft. You know, you look at the sort of the Augustus Westland now, Leonardo, the AW109 sort of civilian version of the Osprey, the tilt rotor aircraft. That aircraft was initially conceived in 1998. It's 25 years on, and it's still not yet certified and in commercial application. And that's the aircraft for which the powered lift category, which is the basis of the FAA approach to eVTOLs, is being used. So this is an incredibly challenging market, both on technology and product development, and can't be taken lightly in terms of the investment necessary. And there's, as I think, as Clem's very well highlighted, there's the sort of infrastructure and then the market adoption rate. So we do expect this market to start in existing helicopter channels, but we will need to reach that inflection point where we want to go access the real value. We have to have vertiports. We have to start to see that opportunity to go enable mobility as a service. But we need to know the consumers are ready, that they've seen enough, that they're going to jump on these aircraft. So our view is, yes, we will see aircraft fly 24, 25. They will trailblaze. We will see, we see them flying as prototypes already, but we'll start to see low numbers of them flying in commercial applications. We expect sort of 2026 to 2030 increasing of aircraft. We expect ultimately about sort of 5,000 of these aircraft to be in operation by 2030, which is quite a sizable fleet actually. But it's the 2030 onwards where we think this all gets incredibly interesting. We think it's the 2030 onwards where you've demonstrated enough to the market, to the regulators, that you can start to open up the airspace more increasingly, build these vertiports, and have the opportunity to go really deliver this democratized mobility that is really, I think, the focus of everyone working in this market.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's very nice. Clem, I'm moving to you here. How important are vertiports in the industry? And most importantly, who will fund them? What about money?
Sure. Look, I mean, vertiports are the missing piece of the puzzle. But as Matteo just mentioned, you know, that these aircraft will start flying as helicopters fly at the moment. But it's only when we break that nexus between aviation and airports that we've got the position where we can actually, you know, have these aircraft fulfill their potential. I think the key to this was a few things here. These aircraft need to be seen as different to helicopters. If you look at it objectively, we already have advanced air mobility. We have helicopters, we've had them for 50 years, but people aren't flying around in them regularly. So the reasons for that are that they're too expensive. They don't go to places where people want to go, and they're not seen as things that are accessible to the general community. So to get the community license to establish these vertiports, we need a few things to happen. We need these aircraft to be super safe. You need to know that, expect that when you get in one, you're going to get to the other end. You know, when you get in an aircraft, you know, powered by Rolls-Royce and fly to the other side of the world, you're not wondering whether you're going to get there or not. You know you're going to get there. And this is the same level of confidence that we need in these aircraft. So that's a really important thing. And they need to be safer than helicopters, because the helicopters do have a bit of a safety concern with people in the community. The next really big one is noise. The noise needs to be significantly less than helicopters for people to accept that they'll have these aircraft landing closer to sensitive areas. In Australia, for example, you know, helipads need to be 500 meters away from a sensitive use, and you know, that's a long way. And there are a lot of people working on getting the noise profile down of these aircraft. We've got a bit of an issue with, you know, people don't like drones. You know, they're seen as annoying. They're privacy concerns. They've got that whiny noise that everybody hates. And you know, we do have a long way to go to get the community to accept this new type of aviation. And it may only be when these aircraft are actually flying that the community can make that assessment. And finally, the issue of price. It needs to be something where people will put up with some inconvenience because they know they can benefit from it as well. Just to give you an example, drone deliveries started with the Google Wing service in Australia about 4 years ago, and that's been a good test bed for the community acceptance. And they've had some issues, but generally they've found that because you know, you may have your neighbour ordering a muffin and a coffee, and that's a bit annoying, but you know that you can order your muffin and coffee in the afternoon and have that benefit as well. So this is where we need these, you know, using the services needs to be available to most people. I don't think we're going to see a position anytime soon where this is going to be similar to the cost of an Uber car. A lot of people sort of tout that, but I think initially they're going to be, you know, this will be as expensive as helicopters. It will come down as the industry matures and the aircraft become cheaper to make, and they're
I get you. Who's the typical investor who will fund these?
Well, there's probably a better question for Luciano, but in terms of vertiports, there's very little funding going into vertiports at the moment. There's been $10 billion going to the aircraft in the last couple of years, and that's a whole range of investors. And you know, some of the biggest aviation companies in the world, you know, Boeing, Bell, Embraer, Airbus, you know, they've all got their own prototypes, and there's a lot of investment in them. But it surprises me how much investment there has been, because without the vertiports, these aircraft can never do the amazing things that that they're destined for. So we have to be very careful that we don't end up with an amazing piece of infrastructure. Amazing aircraft that can't actually be utilized. I point often to the example of the Segway, which was an amazing personal mobility machine, but it's never taken off other than for tourism, and probably because it was a solution looking for a problem, and those Segways are they're too expensive. They can't be operated in most streets and footpaths. And an amazing piece of technology, but it never came to the fore. So that's what we really need to work on here is getting that approval. And flying in the air, I have no doubt is going to happen. As Matteo pointed out, in the next year or two, the front runners will be flying. The issue is where they're going to land. And as far as funding the vertiports, these need to be cheap. We can all design Jetson style vertiports that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, but we need these to be more like bus stops. And this is we've been releasing and we're developing much smaller modular designs than the one behind me. And the idea being that for a few $100,000 you can set up a vertiport and be a part of the network.
Interesting. Thank you very much for your feedback, Len. Luciano, you're an investor. As an investor, what are really some of the areas that you're most excited about when it comes to advanced air mobility? As a private equity investor, who I'm sure is are looking very closely to all these opportunities out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ziad. Yeah, I would take a step back when we think about aviation in particular, right? What excites us is really, if we think about transportation more broadly, it's a $10 trillion market, right? And that makes it a huge opportunity, but it also makes it one of the largest contributors of CO2 emissions, right? So transportation accounts for almost a third of CO2 emissions in the United States as of last year. That bodes for a lot of opportunity, right, in terms of reducing those emissions. And when we think about aviation, clearly the industry is not progressing towards its 2050 goals, right? When we look at the trends of emissions and we look at where the goal is, there's a clear gap that surpasses 20% in terms of where we need to be, right? We're not headed in the right direction. So that means there's a lot of disruptive technologies that really need to come to pass. And when we lay those out, when it comes to aviation, there's a few buckets that excites us, around that space. Electric aircraft, of course, which is kind of the main topic, what we're talking about here. There's going to be likely a combination, as some of the other panelists described. We certainly take a longer term view on these things. But basically, when we think about the electrification, hybrid electric, and so forth, those are, that's a big area of opportunity. A hydrogen aircraft, when we think longer term, that's a market that we're excited about. There are companies that are doing some interesting things in that space. We've seen first flights of fully hydrogen powered engines already taking shape. Autonomous flights, right? And here think of drone technologies and so forth as well for delivering and packaging. That's there's a lot of opportunity around autonomous flights, eVTOLs, right? And here also, when we think about personal craft, right, that are starting to come up, we're starting to see new areas of technologies. And I'll name a couple companies like Opener, which has a Blackfly, which is a personal vehicle, electrified, and it provides you kind of a 60 nautical mile range type of capability at the price of, let's say, a luxury car. So kind of and there are a few different OEMs that are developing technologies around that. Certainly cargo drones is another, area where we see a lot of opportunities. I can think of a company, for example, called Zipline, which is doing amazing things in medical delivery services in Africa, for example, right? Getting critical goods and medicines to disadvantaged communities and lots of growth. And then what we think is really kind of the true short-term opportunity for aviation is, everything around sustainable jet fuel. So there's, when it really comes to decarbonizing, we see SAF as being the more obvious short-term path to get us there. But of course, there's a lot of, that presents a challenge in and of itself as well with production, right? I mean, really, when we look at today, there's about 2% of the supply and the usage of jet fuel is SAF. So there is a huge gap that we need to fill when it comes to the supply chain and offering of SAF to be able to power all these aircraft, right? But that is, from a technological standpoint, one of the key pillars to really lean into, we think, for an opportunity to help decarbonize aviation.
Awesome. Okay, I have one last question. Then I will turn it to the audience, to Hiba, who will go over the chat box and address those questions. I will ask question to all four of you. Okay, this may throw you off a bit, but that's the intent. So, given your expertise, your connections, your know-how, history, given you're all either game changers or seeking to be game changers in a growing industry, and you're at the cutting edge of it, if each one of you is allocated $100 million to play with, $100 million, what would you do with this $100 million, each one of you, to have maximum impact in the industry and build a company that's truly a game changer? What would you do? I'm starting with Fred. I know some of you may not be investors, but you don't have to be investors to do that. Given the intelligence you have and the know-how you have about the industry, I guess you would know how to allocate this kind of money to make a maximum impact. Starting with Fred.
Beautiful. Yeah, I was waiting for that kind of question. Well,
I'm sorry, what did you say?
no, I said I was waiting for that kind of question. That's
Yeah,
good.
because you know me.
Good. It's funny that you actually mentioned that amount. That is the amount around 120 million, for example, or let's say 100 million.
Yeah.
That I have set for us, Light Aviation, for the next 2 years to actually build the full-scale prototype, which means simultaneously I'm now actually talking to different countries and entities for 2,000. So I'm actually shooting for the moon with this project, which means
Dan, would you mute your mic, please? Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry, good. Go ahead, Christian.
So the what I will do with the 100 million is like I built very fast, like within 2 years, the full-scale prototype. And that is where I can actually then close my 2,000 pre-orders that I'm having on in creation right now, basically. So.
Okay. And the second question comes. Dan, please put your mic on. Off, I mean. Freshta. Okay, and fine, you'll do that. So, how long do you think it's going to take to be profitable?
Well, with this, that's why I'm going simultaneously. It's like the power output that I have. Like one is jet fuel and one is hydrogen. And the same way I'm getting the power output within the company to create the prototype, but also to get the 2,000 pre-orders. That my goal is to actually generate revenue as soon as possible with that. So even if part of that pre-orders will generate revenue to the first orders, to turn them to orders, that will probably take maybe 3-4 years once we also like start the certification process. That's the
Okay, I get you. Okay, I move to Matthew. Same question, please.
It's a great question. I think as Preston indicated, yeah, it's sort of 100 million to build a prototype. It's it's probably $1 billion, $1.5 billion to build an aircraft platform. I think when I look at the market, I believe it's coming. I believe one of the resource shortages is going to be pilots. So if you gave me 100 million, I'd be buying a fleet of electric two-seater trainers, and I'd be training as many pilots as I could against the standards of flying these aircraft. I think that is a definite area where we need to invest in a different value creating opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Clem?
Look, I would use 10 million immediately to build a vertiport network using existing helipads. So I'd be partnering with someone like Microflight in Melbourne or Blade, for example, in other parts of the world, and building out a network that can be operated with helicopters right now. That will then give us an opportunity to test our vertiports in real life. The other $90 million I'd use as a bribe to cities around the world to say, well, if you would like to have this investment, be world leaders, then we need the political, bureaucratic, and community support. So who wants it? And there are some cities around the world that are forward-leaning. In my part of the world, Brisbane is particularly forward-leaning. We've got a collection of mayors are clustered around Brisbane that are looking at all sorts of exciting initiatives in the lead up to the Olympic Games in 2032. So that's one example of a city that would probably be very interested in that sort of investment. But I'm sure there are other cities around the world that are leaning into this. Paris is another one. They've just announced 5 vertiports for the volocopter to operate at the Paris Olympics next year. And then in the States, there's other cities such as Miami and Los Angeles. But all these cities are having the same issue. Nobody is quite there with the political support, and I think that with leftover $90 million, being able to offer that as to a city to say we will turn your city into a test bed. We don't want to use existing helipads. We've already done that. We want to use new locations, and we need your political support to do that.
Thank you very much, Clem. Last but not least, Luciano.
Yeah. So thank you for the questions, Ziad. Yeah, I mean, that's literally, those are the decisions that we have to make, every day, being stewards of capital. So I would, definitely take a diversified approach, right? And not really, hone in on any specific, right? One size fits all. I think it's a lot of elements that have to come together, a little bit of what we were discussing. So I would focus on opportunities and enabling technologies that are really gonna bring us there, right? And so, and a mix throughout the ecosystem. So literally, in picking potentially, a leading OEM, right, when it comes to, an actual aircraft, right? We've kind of placed our thesis around that already, as I mentioned, but also enabling technologies around battery technology, right? So, we think, just to give an example, we have a company that we've invested in called Aonix, which is using AI to help select from thousands of different elements and materials that to really optimize the use and the performance of battery, right? So it's taking the physical calculations and testing out of the equation to really optimize and leverage AI around that. Though that's going to be a huge need, right? Battery technology, fluid dynamics, same thing, right? Breakthroughs in the testing and certification of, design and airfoils and so forth around these aircraft, right? And there are technologies that are really, disruptive in terms of cost, in terms of lead time and development capability. So I'd look at the ecosystem, which is a lot of what we do every day, in real world, right? But really pick kind of these winning enabling technologies, and in that sense, take a bit of an agnostic approach where, the industry is moving up, and so are our investment thesis.
Thank you, Luciano. Thank you very much. All right, Hiba, I'd like you to start with the questions. I'd like you to start addressing the questions of two individuals first, please. The first one is Blaine Holt, Brigadier General Blaine Holt. And the second one is Andrew Eros. And the second one is Andrew Eros.
It's
Who
just
are both also aviation specialists.
all right. So
I'm sure I'd like to hear their question, and this is addressed to all the panelists, obviously. And please, let's keep the questions short and the answers short. We can't spend an hour on every answer because there are a lot of people who ask questions, and I'd like to give the opportunity for everybody to ask their questions, starting with Blaine and Andrew. Go ahead, Eva.
Blaine, he was addressing the question to Fresh Talk, and how do you envision the challenges to certification if you decide on a multi-power plant approach with a combination of fuels, electric, hydro? Will that drive more complexity into the certification process?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. It's actually a very good question, and interestingly, yes, I hear that question very often, of course. And I know that it's like a highly regulated, one of the most highly regulated industries is the aviation industry. And yes, certification is a challenge. And like Matthew, for example, also mentioned the AW609 tilt rotors took them, or is taking them, almost 20-25 years. But yes, we have electric, the eVTOLs, the air taxis, actually aggressively pushing forward with the certification. Let me tell you like this, if I started maybe with the Skybus, the 40-seater eVTOL 10 years ago, yes, certification would be hell. But today, I'm very grateful for the air taxis because somehow they have opened up the pathways regarding regulations as well. So there are some advancement and knowing that, and also having shaped our design, particularly considering actually the regulations, we have lowered our certification hurdles, and plus focusing, for example, on developing countries for the Sky Truck version means reducing the hurdles for certification again, which means cargo in remote areas, not necessarily maybe passengers straight away for urban areas. So those are distinctions that we're doing. So in order to advance quickly, but passenger transport will definitely also be certified. But so that's the difference that we're aware of. And yes.
Thank you, Fresh Talk.
Part for the rest of the panelists, I don't know who would like to answer this. It's also, how do you assess the environment to provide electric?
I'm sorry, excuse me. Who is asking this question?
Also Bain, yeah.
Blaine, okay, go ahead.
All right, so the question is for how do you assess the environment to provide electric aviation with feedstock? In other words, while curing the emissions challenge, how do you avoid fossil or nuclear sources?
Can I answer to that one as well? That's a very good topic because I come from, for example, from the green energy sector, and it's very dear to my heart, but still I'm using an aircraft that's using jet fuel, fossil fuel, hoping to use SAF, but we don't have enough SAF, and it's not there yet. Hydrogen, I'm using hydrogen, but it's not really fully available. Bless you, Clem. So, and the idea is now we have just yesterday announced a partnership with Waste to Energy, company that is actually turning solid waste and liquid waste to SAF and hydrogen. So I think if we create that kind of leverage on every step that we're walking on this journey, that's how we can probably best achieve to solve the climate issues.
Okay, so also Blaine has another question. Couldn't Vertiports start near high-end FBOs at executive airports to have lower cost initial penetration?
Is that a question for me? Yeah, look, absolutely. Look, that's where it will start, without a doubt. We will see this, replacing helicopters and private jets using existing aviation infrastructure. So, but as I pointed out previously, that's just the start. In terms of the fuel, it's an interesting question. It's probably something that's not initially I was thinking, well, that's not relevant to me. I'm looking at vertiports and the aircraft to worry about the fuel, but it actually does impact vertiport operators because we have to provide for refueling, and if we have to provide conventional fuel, SAF fuel, fast charging electricity, battery swaps, hydrogen. There's all sorts of things which could make running a vertiport that's agnostic to any aircraft quite difficult. The sooner we get to a standard, the easier it will be and the cheaper it will be to build these vertiports to be suitable for all aircraft.
Yeah, thank you. We have another question from Andrew to Matthew. Energy density is currently a product of size. What do you see as the path to reduce the size and increase energy?
Thank you. I kind of want Luciano's AI to tell me the answer to this one. Actually, I'm really interested in the results. I'm an electrical engineer who's spent too much time in business development and strategy. So give me some latitude on numbers. So jet fuel is about 40 megajoules per kilogram, but our jet engines are only about 35% efficient. So we're down to about 15 megajoules per kilogram, and batteries today are about 1. So we're about 1 to 15 in terms of the difference, and that's what's driving our limited range. We expect solid state lithium metal batteries to get us from about 1 to 2. So start to unlock actually the ranges that we want to do in eVTOLs. So not just go 30 nautical miles, but start to be able to go 100. Critically, why is it so much bigger? It's because we lose so much energy in the hover. And do we get on board, we dramatically increase the range. To go from sort of 2 to 5, we see lithium sulfur technology, probably not till about 2035. And then lithium air is always sitting out there as sort of 10 to 12 megajoules per kilogram, but it always feels like it's sitting out there at sort of 10 years away. So we do, so lithium metal, automotive industry is talking about productionizing that into cars around 2028. So give us another couple of years in terms of developing a safety case, seeing that battery in operation, getting it into an aerospace packaging around 2030, which again marries with that kind of inflection point of we deviate away from the traditional helicopter channels. The infrastructure Clem's going to deliver us is in place. We are seeing this convergence in the technology and the infrastructure and market acceptance that starts to say this all gets really exciting in the sort of early 2030s. I hope that answers your question, Andrew.
Well, thank you. A Christian is asking, how important is lithium in electric aviation, and how do you combat the dominance of a country like China, who controls a large majority of the lithium supply? Any of the panelists could answer this question, please.
So I could just pick up really. So yeah, security of supply is a key issue for us. So companies like CATL are producing fantastic batteries in large volumes, but we equally see both US and European battery companies related to domestic national agendas pushing to demonstrate they've got secure supply chains for lithium. We are a fraction of the automotive power tool industry into aerospace. So while it is going to be critical to us to know how we're going to replace batteries, etc., onto aircraft, we do see government agendas that are starting to secure that supply chain for us.
All right, we have a very interesting question. Recently, the FAA approved flying cars. Is this an initial step for getting approval to moving these technologies forward, or this technology?
I'll take it.
Sorry.
I can. No, I think it's what I mentioned before. Yes, it is a good statement. I think it's showing a good trend towards the movement and the willingness, and also now our technology is of interest, for example, to the FAA, to the NASA as well, that we presented to them. So there is a lot of curiosity, yes, from the FAA, but to the EASA as well, the UKCA. They are all very curious, but also looking at the Middle East, for example, or the UAE, they're very curious. How can we actually actively help to expedite the certification? So I mean, I'm not from the aviation industry, like as an engineer, not, but I see the beauty of collaboration actually in the aviation industry. And I'm very amazed to see, like, from the regulators to the industry partners and stakeholders, everybody's actually looking into the same direction. So yeah, it is a statement from the FAA of doing the first certifications. It is a statement. It's a positive statement.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the statement is correct, or if it is, it's in a non-commercial capacity. Nowhere in the world has an aircraft been certified yet for commercial operations. So there are some aircraft that are flying at the moment, and flying car is probably not a term that people use very often anymore, because it sort of implies that it's both a car and an aircraft, and I think you might be referring to the private operations of there are one or two sort of companies that are developing such aircraft. I think it might be PAL V might be one of them. I think there's one in Australia as well. But they are probably approved for using privately on private property. I don't think there's any that have been able to be registered on public roads, certainly not in Australia, and I'd be surprised if they could pass through all the automotive requirements for registration. So yes, you've got something that looks like a car that can drive around and can take off, but you know, that's very much like in the realms of a hobby enthusiast, you know, building a gyrocopter and flying around in it. It's not the commercial operations which we're really focusing on.
Yeah, Clem, just to put a finer point on that, you're exactly right. The FAA certified that car just for the developers to have some experimental status, so that they had some sort of legal designation, and then, you know, right, true to form, the marketers went wild with that and said, "Hey, look at this! It's an FAA ticket." So, I mean, that's what's happened so far.
Right.
Okay, Hiba, go ahead.
Yeah. To Freshta again, is the hybrid model there to charge the batteries as
from whom? Let's say who's asking the question.
Freshta, this is from David to Freshta.
From David, okay.
Yeah. So is the hybrid model there to charge the batteries as the sole source of power, or will the light eVTOL be powered directly by both the engine and the batteries?
No, actually, we're not using batteries at all. We're using fuel cells and the hydrogen, partially for the electric engines on the wingtips, and we're using jet fuel for the turboprops. So yeah, hybrid would, in generic terms, we understand hybrid would actually generate electricity from the turbo engines that we have. But no, we're actually taking the other hybrid solution, which means we're actually going parallel on parallel routes, having both basically running simultaneously, which is the fuel cells on one part and the jet fuel tanks on the other.
Thank you, Freshta. Hiba, next question from Stan. Could you address the question from Stan, please?
Yes. How is the concept of maintaining military superiority driving interest and investment in eVTOL technology within the defense sector?
Well, I could probably make a comment on that. I think it's in the States it is significant from what I can gather. I think in the States the position is that you missed the boat with drones, that you know, the Chinese are dominant in drones, and that presents as a security risk for other countries. And I think the you know, DJI drones are the standard now for small drones, and from my understanding, is that in the States, the military and government don't want to be caught flat-footed on this. So there is a lot of interest in the development of advanced air mobility with bigger aircraft. In Australia, yeah, look probably to a lesser extent, but we have one developer, AMSL Aero, of an aircraft who has military contracts, and they're interested in using their aircraft as a means of getting soldiers off battlefields, so air ambulance type activities and resupply, that sort of thing. The benefit of military interest is that they have a lot more money than that doesn't need to provide a return. So it's a good source of funding for this very expensive time of getting certified. And also, from an operational perspective, they can be trialing and flying these aircraft without having to go through to the final stage of commercial certification for paying passengers. So it is important, and I think certainly in your part of the world, where most of you are in the States, I think you're well onto that.
Can I just?
Thank you, Clem. Hiba, next, Janet Skinner, please.
Yes, and also we have, okay, have you considered healthcare applications, egress and access points, especially during inclement weather, present unique challenges and time, distance using EMS group, ground transport not ideal. There could be significant opportunity within municipalities.
Could I just a quick one? Yes, it is a key use case that people are seeing for eVTOL. So there's something called the golden 30 minutes, which is the sort of odds of your survival rate out of a serious accident being significantly improved if you're reached by a paramedic or medical service in the first 30 minutes. And you think about the startup time of a gas turbine powered helicopter versus the instant on capability almost of an electric aircraft, and your ability to deploy and therefore bring medical professionals in, and of course critically land vertically. And it's that, if I may just very quickly, that links to the previous question in terms of just the new capabilities you can start to offer people. So in the defense industry, the ability to have an aircraft that has lower noise profile and less, relatively minimal thermal emission profile is attractive. If you can go operate e-stall, so electric short takeoff and landing, if you can take off on the equivalent distance of that New York helipad, sort of 100 meters, then you've got a really exciting concept into the military, and that's what Electra Aero is pushing at the moment in the US with a hybrid system. But critically, once you start carrying a hybrid system around, you're also a power plant. So you can forward deploy a power plant to support your troops, run hardware, run equipment, etc., which has flown itself in rather than relying on a helicopter to sort of cargo ferry that in. And the last one on the military, because it ties to sustainability, the militaries are significant emitters of carbon. In most nations, they are the largest emission creator linked to the government. You find helicopters being used for the most bizarre applications on military bases, moving 50-kilogram payloads because they can't get a forklift or a truck there. If you could replace that with electric aircraft, that is something they're interested in, because you reduce maintenance costs, you reduce the pilots' hours, etc. So yeah, there's a lot of use cases that are being looked at the moment.
If I could just add in there, I think healthcare is hugely important, and humanitarian use of these aircraft, because the community will accept the risk earlier than for transporting people on off to play a round of golf, for example. So there's parallels that can be drawn with drone deliveries. Now, now they're starting to become more commonplace, but the early drone deliveries and the exemptions for drones in Australia, for example, were done by lifesavers. So they would send a drone out to drop a flotation device to a drowning swimmer. Now, the community was very happy for the benefit of that to outweigh to exempt from the rules of not being able to fly over people, which was the original. Well, still a requirement unless you've got a special designation. because the benefit you're creating of saving a life is worth that risk of potentially dropping out of the sky and hurting somebody. Whereas, if you're delivering a donut and a coffee, that's of fairly low community benefit. So I think we'll see in advanced air mobility with air ambulances and that sort of thing, that the community will more readily accept these aircraft flying in perhaps in the early days and in an experimental way because of the benefit they can provide.
Thank you, Clem. Hiba, Harry Garrol, please. Harry Garrol.
All right, 1 second, we'll go to Harry. Okay, recently the FAA approved flying cars. This, I think we've already addressed this.
Yes, you already addressed that, Hiba. Yeah.
So let's go to
Okay, let's move to Denise Meredith.
Denise. All right. The issues of public reception of acceptance. Are there any lesson that you can learn from the experiences of Waymo with diverse driverless cars?
What were the Waymo experiences? I'm not familiar with that.
Well,
Waymo was they're the cars that right now they're transporting people to the airport, etc. But they don't have drivers, literally. And so they've had a test going for the past few years of introducing these cars into certain cities to see how people will accept them. And I was involved a little in some of the evaluations.
Well, that sounds like a sensible way to do things, to start crawl before you walk, before you run. And I think it's particularly relevant when we're talking about pilotless aircraft, because remember that all these eVTOLs are being built to, or most of them are being built to take the pilot out eventually. Some of them are being built to never have a pilot, such as the Whisk Boeing-owned aircraft. And I think, obviously, you need to be having limited testing in controlled environments to minimise the risk to occupants and to other people. So yeah, look, that seems to make a lot of sense. I think the biggest risk we've got at the moment is people going too fast and the public losing confidence because there are accidents and there are deaths. Now, the issue of risk is an interesting one. People want to know that if they're getting into an aircraft that it's not going to crash. But we're blind to the fact that statistically, every time we step into a motor vehicle, there's a chance that you could die in that motor vehicle. And it's not something that's talked about, but you look at the statistics in my part of the world. We have 300 deaths a year in Victoria, and and that's just standard. Every year it's around that. It was up around 1,000 until we introduced seatbelts and other measures, but that's the same issues is around the world. So we do need these aircraft to be super safe. But realistically, life happens, and there are things that go wrong in any form of transport or whenever you wake up and get out of bed and cross the road.
All right, we have 10 minutes left till 5:30. Let's close, Hiba, with David Clark's questions.
Yes, we have addressed some of them. I still have. All right. The eVTOL electric aviation industry is a transformative industry, as Luciano said, with profound effects on society. What are some comparative transformative changes that have occurred in the past that are similar to the level of transformation to be brought by electrical aviation? Invention of the internet, advent of modern jet travel. So, who would answer this, please?
Well, I'd say that the revolution only comes about through the vertiport landing sites. So I don't see it being a revolution if all we're doing is creating a different type of aircraft, a different type of helicopter, essentially that is propelled with different fuel. that's not a revolution to me. So the opportunity we have here is, if that aircraft is sufficiently different to helicopters that the community will accept new vertiports, then we really do have a revolution. But if the community doesn't want that, this isn't going to happen, and these will be a pleasant replacement for helicopters, and a whole lot sexier way to travel than helicopters, but not a revolution.
I have another question for you, Clem, from David as well. How many times quieter than helicopters are eVTOL aircraft, and are they lower in noise in sufficient amounts to significantly move the needle on public opposition to skyports, as has been the case with helicopters or heliports?
Yeah, there's so many aircraft in development. I couldn't give you a blanket answer to that. I've certainly seen some of them claim to be 50 to 100 times quieter than a helicopter. I've seen the figure 50 decibels as being the figure when the aircraft are flying horizontally. So lifting is obviously going to be more going to be noisier. But most of the aircraft are being built with wings in the body. So when they're traveling overhead, they will basically blend into the background noise, and that's really the aim. But there's probably the best to get an idea of the noise, and this is most of these aircraft are in stealth mode. We're not really privy to the noise or to fly vision of flight tests. But Joby, which is Joby, is if you go onto YouTube and have a look there, they've done some comparisons of the Joby flying with other aircraft flying immediately after it to compare it. And I've seen the Volocopter fly last week in Paris at the air show there, and it is significantly quieter. It's not silent, but it's significantly quieter.
Yeah, we don't know just yet. We've got NASA scientific studies that suggest the aircraft will be a third quieter than a helicopter on a pan. So when you're standing next to a helicopter, sort of the environment you're used to, and 100 times quieter than a helicopter flying above you at 2,000 feet, which is Clem accurately describes as the level by which the aircraft effectively disappears into the background noise behind a city. Joby has delivered its propeller blades to NASA as part of an R&T activity in 2023. So the way that NASA operates and the way they provide public information out, actually this is the year that we start to get data to be able to validate. But all the eVTOL platforms are charging after noise levels below that of a city. They think that is critical, and I would agree, to go unlock that mobility vision.
Excellent. I think we come to a close here. We're around 5:30 to the dot. Thank you so much for your participation, your support, your insight. I hope we'll see you at upcoming webinars and live events. We have 3 live events coming up this year. One on August 17 regarding cybersecurity and blockchain, one in October on healthcare, and one in November on renewable energy. I really appreciate your support. Thank you, David, for sponsoring this. Great first-class group of people. Excellent question, excellent Q&A. Have a great evening, great weekend, and hope we'll stay in touch. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's really amazing.